This is the Platinum Podcast.
Welcome to the Platinum Podcast, Nick.
Thank you, Joe. I'm excited to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure, man. Myself and all the other members, we've been absolutely loving the video content you've been putting together for us, man. It's been epic.
Yeah, well, I love doing it. I mean, I really do. Personal development books or business books, like that's my thing, it brings me a lot of energy.
I can tell, man, that energy comes across in every single video. It's pretty inspiring, man. It's great to see.
Yeah, thank you.
So how did it all start? Obviously, it's got to have come from a love of self-development first and foremost, but where did you get the idea that you're just going to start putting these reviews together and try and get them out there?
Well, you know what? I was never actually a reader. So I'm 27 years old now. And when I was graduating college or university, I was pretty disconnected from the classroom, right? I was a terrible student. I never read any books. I didn't see the value in it, but I knew everybody was talking about money and doing crazy stuff after school and starting businesses. And an early mentor of mine at an internship I took at a software company, he gave me a couple book recommendations and I went through the books because he had recommended them and he was pretty successful. And yeah, they totally changed my perspective. Like I had a very direct inflection point in my life where I said, I am now a reader, right? Like I just identified as somebody who read books and I started reading tons of them. And so I was posting about it on my personal social media, like check this out or check this out, or, and everybody saw a big change in me. I kind of went from like ego and insecure to fulfilled and focused on impact, which is like a very big change. And so, yeah, everybody started asking me about what book is good for this and what book is good for that. And that's really how the business started.
That's absolutely huge. That's a really interesting point that you touched on, that going from ego and insecure to impact related. What did that transition look like for you? What kind of person were you before you started reading?
Well, I was never a bad person, but I was focused too much on myself. In the US, I grew up and I played sports and I had some good friends. And, when I went to school, I was really focused on partying and having a good time. I definitely drank a lot. And yeah, I did, I wasn't focused on the future so much. I was focused on the present. And yeah, I wasn't focused on developing long-term relationships. I was just sort of, I don't know, like I was sort of short-term focused. And at the same time, I was also really insecure. I cared way too much about what other people thought of me, like way too much. And it guided a lot of decisions that I was making. And so, yeah, operating from that place was pretty scary, right? I mean, my compass was like, hey, you're the best and focus on yourself short-term and go party. But also you care way too much what people think about you. So make sure that you use that when you're making decisions. And then, yeah, I started to focus on impact. And even for years after I started to focus on impact, I still didn't really want to mention it because I thought, everybody's going to call me out and say, nah, years ago you weren't like that, so there's no way you're like that now. And impact for me, listen, my life changed with these books and I just want to help other people make those same changes. And so if I can help other people make progress in their lives, make progress in their health, make progress in their wealth, make progress in their communication with loved ones, happiness, fulfillment, then that makes me happy. And I know that it makes me happy. And so I'm blessed that I was able to find that out at, I guess, such a young age.
Yeah, I love that. My journey is fairly similar. I mean, except I wouldn't consider myself to have not been a bad person. I was not a good person many, many years ago by any stretch of the imagination. And it's only by having a complete and utter mental breakdown that I had to kind of really readdress my identity and who I was as a human being. And luckily I had books. I never really had any particular mentors or people to look up to, any constructive people to look up to, put it that way. And I've found my salvation in these pages, and it completely turned my life around and enabled me to do that.
What were some of the early books that did that for you?
Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. That had a big impact. And I got into psychology from a pretty early age. So I was actually reading psychology textbooks. This then led me to study psychology in later life as well. And it was really by just starting to assess my own thought processes that I started to really branch out into all these different topics. What about you? What were the ones that really got you going on that journey?
Sorry, I got a little siren in the background. I hope you can't hear it too loud. The first book that I read was Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And so I was mentioning insecurity. I was in business school and everybody's talking about these great jobs they're going to get after school and talking about investing and starting businesses and stuff. And I just, even though I was in business school, I didn't know anything about those subjects. And so I had a lot of insecurity around money and how it worked and what those different terms of investment are and things like that. And then I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it was like a very basic introduction to a lot of the subjects that I was insecure about and that I didn't know about. And so after reading one book, I was able to not only participate in those discussions, but kind of like confidently see where or how I was going to handle my future. And so that's one specific example of either a skill gap or an insecurity that, again, kind of like flip-flopped after one experience. And so right after that, I went headfirst into money. I read Money Master the Game by Tony Robbins. I read The Richest Man in Babylon by George S. Clason. I went down that rabbit hole. I read Cash Flow Quadrant by Kiyosaki. I also started, right around that time, I said, what other areas of my life can I apply this to? Where else am I insecure? What else can I help kind of patch up and make stronger, more bulletproof? And so I read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Covey. And then that book taught me I could read anything. And so, yeah, I went pretty far down that money rabbit hole at first.
Yeah, the 7 Habits, that was one that I got really engrossed in. It's one that I've actually read like a few times because you quite touched on it. It's quite an in-depth book, and it covers such a broad spectrum of the whole life experience, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I found that across time, there's been different parts of that book that have impacted me in different ways.
Yeah, there have been books like that for me too, where I read the same book and it's a different book, the second, third, or fourth time that I read it. And sometimes you read through a lens of what you're looking for. That's what I find. Like, Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki is a good example because the first time I read the book, I didn't even notice that it was talking about real estate. I didn't even notice that was part of the book. And then maybe like the third or fourth time I read it, I'm like, this is a real estate book. And I had no idea the first couple times. So yeah, that definitely happens to me too.
Yeah, it's funny the parts that you zero in on. I often say like we're so lucky nowadays with the wealth of information that we have. And I really attest that to our evolution as a species. The fact that you have a lifetime of information condensed into say 300 pages. And then we have the ability to combine that with our own experiences, synthesize the information, and then apply it to our lives. And I feel like this is exactly why we're turbocharging and growing at such an amazing rate.
Yeah, this is the first time in human history that billions of people have access to the same information. And for the most part, it's all free. I mean, you can find virtually anything on the internet. And yeah, that line that you just mentioned, like it was taught to me as condensing decades into days. It's like a little catchy line. And that really hooked me early on too, because in the classroom, like at university, I don't know, it moved kind of too slow for me. Like, let's meet 2 times a week for an hour and a half and you're going to learn this subject. And it's like, no, I wanted to go faster than that. And so reading those books, condensing, let's just say 30 years of information into 3 hours of reading, and then you can go apply it immediately. Like, that's what I want to be doing. It's faster, it's more aggressive. And at the time it kind of met my style, we live in an instant gratification world too. So yeah, I agree. It's cool how the whole world is kind of getting to that same place now.
Yeah, it's a really powerful thing. And where you are specifically right now, you're literally at the forefront of the self-development world in that respect. I mean, what are some of the highlights in the job that you're doing right now?
Oh, so many. I mean, my favorite thing about running a community like this is just that people become very vulnerable when they're talking to a person of authority, right? And so I'm the book guy. They'll tell me about their deepest, darkest problems, sometimes over an Instagram DM, and ask for book recommendations that can help solve that problem. And so I love making or giving book recommendations. It's like playing book soulmates. Like, let me ask you a couple of questions about what you like, what you don't like, what you need, what's really bothering you, the different styles, who do you look up to, and let me find the best book for you. And that's just the best, because then every once in a while, people come back to you and they say, hey, that book really changed my life, like genuinely changed the way that I look at the world. Thank you. And there's nothing better than that for me. And then, I mean, outside of that, what's cool is I get access to a lot of these authors, and a lot of these authors are the world's best at what they do. Pick any subject. You know, there's a handful of people that we know about on social media who have big profiles and talk about these things professionally and have probably written books about them. And so it's like the perfect excuse to talk to those guys or those women. And I love being able to interact with them. So that's kind of the second biggest thing, I think, if I had to pick two. It's impact, and it's kind of networking and connection.
I mean, that's a match made in heaven. Ultimately, you're getting access to some of the best information in the world, which is really fun. You're getting to learn every single day. You're getting to pass that information on to others, and you're getting to learn from the best people in their fields.
Exactly. And repetition leads to retention. And so I'm reading these books through a lens where I want to teach them, which helps retention for sure, because you want to understand things and you'll take the extra time to look things up that you don't understand if you're about to speak about them. And then you rewrite your notes, and then you're speaking about them all the time. And so, yeah, they get cemented in your brain and you're able to retain them so much more. That also means that your subconscious is rooting that information in a stronger way. You're creating a stronger neural connection to that info. And then you can go implement it everywhere because you've gone through the process so many times. So yeah, I mean, it is a cool kind of combination of all of the factors that you just mentioned.
I love that. You're becoming like the internet of books at this point. You're just kind of condensing all this information. Like they say, I mean, when you teach something, you learn it twice, right? So you've literally got all this information downloaded in your brain from the best authors in the world. I think that's absolutely epic.
Yeah, well, you know what? Early on, I watched, you know who Ty Lopez is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for
So
sure.
early on, I used to get those internet or those YouTube ads like Ty Lopez here in my garage with my Lamborghini and my books. And
I was watching
I
those.
got, yeah, I got into a little bit of his content early on, and like very early on, right around the same time that I was recommended Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I was fascinated by the fact that he could quote dozens of different, whatever they were, innovators, philosophers, it didn't matter. Like he could quote anybody in an interview conversation. And I thought that was the coolest thing. I'm like, you know what, if you can borrow the credibility of Socrates or Marcus Aurelius or Seneca or Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or whoever during a conversation, you instantly look smarter. And so how did Ty get to that level? You know, number one, he's an internet marketer, but number two, he reads a lot of good books, and a lot of books he used to read, he spent a lot of time in. And so, yeah, that repetition kind of gives you the lens to look through. Like, you know, if I'm facing a problem, maybe I need to use a framework from Steve Jobs to solve it. And I can do that because I've read 3 or 4 books about him. And like that becomes a very cool scenario too. So yeah, I also wanted to be like Ty, I guess, very early on.
That's a good inspiration. So what do you do? And so for some of our members, they're maybe just getting started on their journey. They're really starting to dip into books now. What would you say are some really good methods to help retain that information?
Well, first, if you're just getting into reading, I would recommend picking your books one of 2 different ways. Number one, identify some skills that you'd like to attain or some areas of your life that you'd like to improve. Maybe you feel unhealthy and you want to get into biohacking, or maybe you just want to make more money. So you want to learn about investing, and your platform's perfect for that, but maybe somebody recommended a good book too. So if you're energized and motivated about a subject, you're more likely to go through that book. You're more likely to take more notes. You're more likely to identify opportunities to try things out. And I think that's very important in the first stages of reading, because if you pick up a book and you're not interested in it and it kind of just flops, well, you might not pick up another book, and that's a dangerous situation. So read something you're interested in, make sure that it's a book that like you're going to fly through. The other scenario, if you can't really identify those immediately, think about, who do I want to be like? Who excites me? And if you're an entrepreneur, it might be Steve Jobs or Bill Gates. But if you want to get into health and nutrition, it might be a Dave Asprey or something like that. And just pick whatever genre of person you want to become like, and then read a book about them. they all have biographies and autobiographies. And what's nice about those is, yes, they're nonfiction, but they also kind of read like a movie. I mean, you could play these things in your head as if it was a movie happening. And those starting a business in mom's garage, like that kind of story always excites people. So pick one of those if you don't know who to be like. And so once you've got a book that you're super interested in, there's more things that you'll want to take notes about. And I think that's important. So start taking notes. What I do, and I think the best system is for me, is I read a physical paper book or a Kindle or an audiobook, but I prefer a physical paper book because I highlight and take notes right in the book as I'm reading. When I'm done with the book, I go back and I rewrite into an Evernote document online. I type up to my top 10 takeaways. And so sometimes, like one of those first books that I read, Think and Grow Rich, that you mentioned by Napoleon Hill, I rewrote every single thing that I highlighted from that book very early on. And it was like 200 different quotes. That's a lot. You're not going to implement and reflect on 200 different items. So pick up to 10. That's what I would recommend for people when they're first starting out, because you don't want to get overwhelmed. And so what are the 20% of your takeaways that are potentially going to lead to 80% of the impact in your life? Pick those 10 takeaways and write them down into an Evernote document. And then what I mentioned before is that repetition leads to retention. And so in an ideal scenario, you would systematically review that information over time. So a couple times, maybe in week 1, then maybe only once or twice in week 2, once in week 3, and then kind of space it out. But systematically review that information over time so that you can cement it into your brain. And then, like I said, too, your subconscious will look for more opportunities to implement things, because behavior change is the real goal whenever we read these books. You're not just reading them to read them, because if you're just doing that, then it's kind of like playing video games. I mean, your life isn't changing when you pick up the book or pick up the controller, if that's the goal. And so, yeah, behavior change happens through that repetition, that repetition, that repetition. And that's what I would recommend for first-time readers. I could go way deeper than that, but I'll kind of leave it there for now.
No, I think that's a really good starting point. I've literally just interviewed a guy about human optimization, and he was just talking about the importance of repetition to do neuroplasticity and just embedding those habits and just getting them on the right path. And I think that you also highlighted something else that's really important. People become like these, it becomes like spiritual entertainment, doesn't it? Where it's just like this process of just consuming information and then doing absolutely nothing with it. And I think it's really dangerous. Not dangerous. I mean, it's not as bad as a drug habit, put it that way, but for sure, you're not going to get the best out of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very true. And what's crazy about this industry, and I mean, I'm not pointing fingers at anybody specifically, but I think a lot of these books are written in a way that you get a sense of achievement, or you get that dopamine hit during the reading process. Like if a book says, imagine yourself 5 years from now in perfect shape, running on the beach, waving to everybody and life is good. Like you'll feel that enjoyment, and then you won't go do it because the book is written in a way to make you feel that way, because then you're more likely to be like, this book changed my life, and hand it out to everybody. And so that's what gets a little bit dangerous sometimes, is if you feel that achievement during the process of reading, not during the process of implementation. And yeah, I mean, the neuroplasticity thing is really big too. And it kind of goes hand in hand with picking those first books, because your brain changes in one of two ways: either a big euphoric emotional moment, which sometimes can happen with those early books like they did for me, or a slow, steady, progressive change over time where you're just kind of like digging those neural trenches. And so, yeah, you want to aim, I think, early on for something that completely changes your identity into, I am a reader now. And if those books excite you, then you can make it happen. Otherwise it might take 10 or 15 books, kind of slowly digging those trenches before you're like, I get it now. I get why everybody does this.
Yeah, that makes a hell of a lot of sense. So what are some of the rabbit holes you're going down right now in terms of your reading?
Oh, everything. I mean, over the last couple of years, I've just become so interested in so many different subjects. I'm rereading The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss right now. And I think the biggest rabbit hole that I'm focusing on is working less to achieve more. There are a couple of other really good books that I've read in the past that Like I'll use one example from this book, Essentialism by Greg McKeown. And Greg says that there is a certain point where if you work harder, you actually diminish your output, which is really interesting because we live in a culture where a lot of people say more and more and more. You know, if you're working 80 hours a week, you can get more done by working 82 hours a week. And it's like, you know, optimizing for hustle. But then this guy, Greg, comes along and says, look at all of this research. It says that if you have a good baseline of productivity, and I'll just use a fictional number, like 40 hours a week, if you work more than 40 hours a week, your results will actually go down. You'll get less done than if you were only working 40 hours a week. And so this thought process about working less to achieve more is really interesting. So it's like, what levers can you change in your life to actually make that happen? And so in Tim's book, The 4-Hour Work Week, the subtitle is Escape the 9-to-5, Earn More and Live Like the New Rich, or something like that. In Tim's book, he talks a lot about those principles and those levers that you can kind of crank on to work less in your life, but achieve more. And so I've been playing a lot in that space, kind of like you're saying, life optimization, work optimization, focusing on high impact activity. And I'll probably go back and reread Essentialism by Greg McKeown and maybe a couple of books on minimalism. I'm getting back into that area of life right now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think the 4-Hour Work Week is one that I want to revisit. It's something that I read at the beginning of my kind of digital nomad journey. And it was something, when I read it, it was really it was good for me because like, oh, this is actually confirming I'm doing all of the right things already. I was already on the right path.
Yeah.
And that was 3-4 years ago now. And now I think it'll be time to revisit and start to implement some of the more of the automation strategy, some of the things where, because he talks a lot about kind of living in your joy and the way he operates. He only really focuses attention on the things that he really enjoys doing. And that's where you get the best output.
Yeah.
And that's where we want to be, right? We don't want to spend work like all of our waking hours replying to emails and stuff that we don't actually care about.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very true. He defines that as laziness. He says, let's redefine laziness anew. It's not, you know, watching Netflix at 9 p.m. It's answering emails that are unnecessary, or it's doing technical work that could be outsourced for $2 an hour. Like that is laziness, because the new rich, like that whole principle of the book, they care about time and mobility. And so if you're spending your time in the whirlwind of meaningless activity every single day, like you're a lazy person. That's what he says. I'm not calling you a lazy person. And yeah, it's like, it's a very interesting mindset to adopt. And see, I had a different experience with that book. I read it. It was probably first 10 books, maybe first 15. And I was in an office job at the time, and I used the strategies in that book to remove myself from, you know, from being location dependent. And then I sort of followed Tim's journey. I mean, I went to Argentina by myself and I solo traveled there for a little over a month. And, you know, I implemented tons of the strategies, and now I'm at where I'm at. So it's cool to see that it sort of reaffirmed the life that you were already living, but it sort of created the one that I am right now, which is cool.
It's good to see that it works from both sides of the spectrum.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's an absolutely huge success. I mean, I love that book. I took a hell of a lot of inspiration. I still listen to his podcasts now. I think he's a hugely insightful guy, really, really powerful.
Yeah,
So
he is.
now you're in a place where you've optimized your life to a certain extent. You're in Colombia now, right?
Yeah, I just spent the last about a month and a half in Colombia, and I hate the cold weather. That's my main motivation. And so I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, and right now it's snowing. I think it snowed something like 3 out of the last 7 days. And so when you wake up in the morning and you want to go to the gym or something, and you have to like use an ice pick to get your windshield wipers unstuck from the front of your car, like I don't want to be doing that. And so during the winters, I travel internationally and I kind of stay out of the Northeast. And so yeah, it's been Colombia for the last month and a half, and it's warm and sunny and the beaches are amazing. And I went snorkeling this weekend. And so very different than Boston, Massachusetts right now.
Yeah, I haven't actually been to that side of the world yet, but from what I'm hearing, there's some good entertainment over that way. I'm sure there's plenty of fun to be had.
Yeah, you know what? I just spent a month in Medellin, and Medellin, Colombia is right in the middle of Colombia, and it kind of sits in a valley, and they call it La Ciudad de la Eterna Primavera, which is the city of eternal spring. And so it's the same temperature all year round because it sits on the equator. And there's a big nomad culture now too. So it's becoming a little bit of a tech hub. There's a lot of new infrastructure, a lot of companies moving to Medellin, a lot of young professionals. And so I love that internet cafe lifestyle. Like wake up in the morning, grab your laptop, go get a coffee. The weather's beautiful. Meet some people that are speaking your same language, over a cup of coffee and learn what they do. And like, that's just a cool lifestyle. So Medellin's a really good spot for it. And this city, Cartagena's on the water and it's beautiful, but I'm going to head back to Medellin for another month just because I loved it so much.
Yeah, it's a real beautiful place to live, like the way to live, I want to say, because it's really similar where we're at in Bali right now. The vibe is unbelievable. The types of people that you meet, it's just full of entrepreneurs that have all found a way to liberate themselves from that 9 to 5, as Tim Ferriss puts it, and find a completely different way of living. What kind of different people have you met along your journey or different ways that people have found to liberate themselves from that type of life?
I hope you guys are enjoying this episode of the Platinum Podcast, brought to you by Platinum University, the real life school of mindset, online business and financial independence. Platinum University teaches you everything conventional education missed. We're helping thousands of people to create multiple passive income streams that create more money, time and freedom. We literally guide you through every step of the process with the help of our in-house experts and our powerful, like-minded community groups. To get 35% off your monthly subscription, permanently lock in the discounted price of $39.99 and get access to our mindset, forex, dropshipping, stocks, crypto, affiliate marketing and property content, visit platinumuniversity.co.uk/join.
One of the beautiful things about traveling internationally is that you meet people who are living this lifestyle in a variety of different ways. Everybody from travel nurses to internet entrepreneurs to people who just saved. I met somebody last week who just saved up 3 years worth of like budgeted South American travel and he stopped working. It's like a legit mini retirement. For 36 months, he's decided not to work. And you don't need that much money to do that in South America. And so, yeah, I mean, you meet people from every walk of life, from every country on the planet. One thing that fascinates me is how many languages people speak. I have such a tough time. I mean, I speak English and I'm pretty good with Spanish now, but you meet people who speak 4, 5, 6 languages. That kind of blows my mind. So yeah, you meet people from every walk of life. And that's one of the nice things about personal development books is you read a book like The 4-Hour Workweek and you could take almost any profession and turn it into a remote position. I mean, almost anything imaginable. And then you go out in the world and you meet these people and you ask them what books they read. And most of the time it's The 4-Hour Workweek. So yeah, it shows that there's a lot of possibility out there.
Yeah, I think that's some huge inspiration for a lot of people that are looking to find that escape. What are some of the some of the professions that you never would have thought you would see go remote?
Oh, it's a good question. I'll have to think about that for a little while. Strangest professions. I don't know if I have any great examples that are coming to mind immediately. Every once in a while, you get somebody who doesn't really want to talk about it. Like, oh, I kind of just, I don't know, and then like you could just tell that they moved the subject. I met somebody on a food tour in Medellin, and he was he was super talkative, and he was telling us about how he's lived in all of these different countries. Like I said, okay, how do you define living in a country? And he was like, 3 months at least. I said, okay, how many different countries have you lived in for at least 3 months? And he was American. And he said, probably 12. And I said, what do you do? And then immediately shut off and wouldn't talk anymore. So you get people kind of like that sometimes that don't want to tell you what they're doing. And I guess that's the only strange thing that comes to mind right now.
Yeah, I suppose if you're in Colombia, it doesn't surprise me that you bump into a few people that don't want to talk about where they're earning their money from.
Yes, that's probably true. Actually, yeah. I mean, now you're triggering more things that I'm thinking about. I met another guy in Medellin who, this was so funny. I met another guy and I went on a different excursion with him, and in the car ride back or maybe at dinner or something, we started talking about what we do professionally. And he said, I'm in the weed business, marijuana business. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, what do you do? He's like, well, I'm in wholesale marijuana. I'm like, is that legal? And he's like, I've been doing it for a lot longer than it was legal. And then he said, yeah, I got into Colorado, and in Colorado, a lot of people are encroaching on my territory. And then he got it like a little bit aggressive. And he's like, so everybody needs to back off. And I'm like, so I'm like, let's bring this back to business. How did you make that a remote position? And he said, I built up the infrastructure, I built up the relationships, and now I can orchestrate my wholesale weed business from other countries. And I thought that was really interesting. I mean, you wouldn't have expected to find somebody like that abroad, I guess.
Yeah, I think anytime that you were orchestrating international drug deals from your phone in another country, I'd class that in the interesting category, to be totally honest with you.
Yeah, he was interesting. I'm sure if we kept talking about it, more and more of them would pop up. But yeah, you meet a lot of really interesting people, and yeah, it's possible for anybody.
Yeah, I think that's the most beautiful thing about this is it is possible for absolutely anybody. And this is something we often try and teach at Platinum University. People are not aware how many options there are, how feasible it is, no matter what your skill set is, where you are in the world, you can just make an income online nowadays.
Yeah, you really can. And now you've got me thinking about all these funny scenarios. I know a couple people that travel internationally almost full time, and the companies that they work for don't even know, which is really goofy. Like, the companies that they work for, hired them for a remote position in the US, and they probably think they're still in the US. So, but I mean, you're totally right. The ways that you can generate income are literally limitless, and your community knows that best. I mean, you guys talk about so many different income generating subjects. And then when you go into one of those subjects, like crypto, as an example, there's 200 different threads that you can go down, so it's just, it does show the infinite possibilities, like the limitless possibilities for making remote income.
Yeah, for sure. Is the crypto world something you're getting involved in yourself?
It was a couple of years ago, actually. And I went very deep down the rabbit hole, because when I graduated school, I took a job in logistics and, software sales, but in the logistics space. And crypto, more like the supply chain infrastructure that could sit behind crypto, was something I got really into at first. And that was really interesting to me. I did invest in Bitcoin, 2014 or whatever it was. And then I got out, and I haven't been in it in many years. Now I'm starting to get more interested again, obviously, after what's happened over the last 3 months. But I know it's a newer subject for Platinum U as well. You guys are getting more invested in it.
We've been pretty invested since the beginning, to be honest. So my business partner, James, who I think you connected with in the first instance, he's been involved in crypto for a long, long time now. He's been a trader for most of his hustling life. And he's absolutely killing it right now. We've actually just had to bring in a new head of crypto. We brought in a new expert, a guy called Dan. He's an absolute genius. Just to keep up with the demand for content, because everyone's so hungry to learn more about this. A, because there's so much money to be earned, and B, because it's such an interesting space. We had a guy called Robert Breedlove come on, really, really influential guy in that sector. And he just talks about it from a more philosophical standpoint, because Bitcoin is something that's not regulated by governments. And that makes it a really interesting thing. So for a company such as Platinum University, who cares about freedom, ultimately you can gain freedom by improving your financial position. Another form of freedom would be to kind of set yourself outside of normal governmental structures. So there's kind of the double-edged sword there of really interesting possibilities that come with crypto.
Yeah, well, I support all of them. And in the logistics space, I mean, crypto has so many possibilities. And that's why I love, companies platforms like Bitcoin nowadays. They're standardized, they're normalized, they're being accepted by everybody. Large hedge funds in the US are now investing massive portions of their portfolio into crypto. And so, yeah, it blows my mind. And I like to listen to other people talk about it, I guess, a lot more than I like to play in the space in the immediate short term, just based on my priorities. But my girlfriend, she invests in Bitcoin and like kind of on a weekly basis, a portion of her income. And I think it's a smart thing for a lot of people to get involved in because yeah, clearly it's going to go in that direction. And a lot of us in this space who are reading personal development books in my community, we all love freedom too. I mean, it's such a pillar of personal development is the ability to educate yourself and remove yourself from relying on any third party, especially the government.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree with that more. So
Yeah.
talking about your personal development, what kind of route are you on right now? Where are you really focusing your attention?
Well, I mentioned working more with less, but BookThinkers as a company, we're doing a couple of interesting things. I mean, we're developing a lot of really cool partnerships with authors and publishers to help them promote their books, and that's helping to grow our community in a pretty drastic way. We're also putting out we've tried to put out a mobile application twice that helps with one of the questions you asked before. How can people retain and implement more information with the books that they're reading or from the books that they're reading? And so we're working with a new group of people to put out a new mobile application where essentially you can house your book notes and you could standardize your book notes. Doesn't matter if you're reading a physical book, an ebook, an audiobook, throw your notes into our platform, standardize them, tag them. You'll have a virtual bookshelf where you can kind of filter for things, rate things, search for things. But then you can turn on your systematic reminders and you'll get pushed those notifications to read and review your notes on a systematic basis. And so I've been reading a lot about the science behind retention. I've been reading a lot about those things. And that's why I brought it up, because there's a lot of really interesting science behind that area of the world. I mean, brain optimization is really interesting to us too. And he's not an official board member or anything, but somebody that we meet with on a weekly basis. His name is Kevin Horsley. He wrote a book called Unlimited Memory, and he's become sort of like an unofficial dad or parent to book thinkers, and he's helping guide a lot of our decision making there. He won this crazy award at one point for memory, at like a Guinness World Record, where he memorized the first 10,000 digits of pi. And he entered into this competition, I guess, where they like spew off a random number, like what's digit number 5,226, and you've got to know it. And so he's just been able to use his brain in ways that we can't even comprehend. And so to get him involved so that people can retain and implement more from these books is kind of our short-term goal. So like I said, I've been reading a lot in that space and the importance of memory and things like that. And then there will be a social aspect to this app too. So an activity feed where you can see what your friends are reading and what they thought of those books, and kind of like a newer aesthetically pleasing version of Goodreads or something like that, if you're familiar with their platform, plus the retention piece. So yeah, I'm excited for that too.
That's an amazing way to expand the community, and community is absolutely everything. This is something that we quickly realized as part of Platinum University, is just surrounding people with the right people. Obviously, we all know you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and the power of the community is huge. The ability that it has to like push people on these trajectories and really support people in these different endeavors and their learning journey is so powerful. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you put together from a reading perspective.
Yeah, well, you know what? You guys do an amazing job at it. And just like personal development can be a very lonely space to be in because you might be the most energetic or motivated or disciplined person in your friend group. And that's kind of a lonely feeling sometimes when you don't have anybody to talk to. Every single category that you guys cover in your chats, I mean, it can be the same way. And I see people connecting and having interesting discussions from all over the planet. And you can meet your best friends or you can meet your mentors in your platform. And I'd love to create a community outside of social media for us to do the same thing. And so, yeah, I'm excited to see what it's like as well. And, you know, that's just another story of entrepreneurship too. Like we've tried to build this twice. Both of them failed for different reasons. And, you know, the first one kind of found product market fit, but we outsourced the development, and the company that we outsourced to kind of went ghost. And, you know, basically a lot of the infrastructure that we built failed from a technology standpoint, and we didn't have anybody technical in-house or the budget at the time to fix it. So we let it die. And the second time we didn't find product market fit, which is something that's really important. And it's because we lacked community. it was a tool that was used solo and it just didn't work for us. So yeah, I mean, we're learning from what our community wants too. We're surveying these people and talking with them all the time, our raving fans. And I can't wait to kind of walk in your footsteps and get that community outside of social media.
You're 100% on the right path. I've seen the type of engagement and like the value that you're providing to the community that you already have within social media. And that's where it starts. It's that providing value to people. And like you said, there's nothing more fulfilling than that impact of helping people on their own journeys.
Yeah, and you mentioned freedom again. Like I really value the same things that you mentioned. You did a better job at articulating it than I can, but we want to get out of the social space so that we can be free to operate. You know what I mean? Like if Instagram shut down tomorrow, that would be a really big hit for our business. If YouTube or Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook or whoever shut down tomorrow, it'd be a really big hit for our business. And so how can we get those people out of those social media platforms and into a community that we can control? And I think that's going to be a really important step for us as a business too.
Yeah, I think that's a really huge point. I mean, it's the same for so many businesses. If Instagram was to fall apart or ban you, is often the case when they change their algorithms, etc., it's catastrophic for so many different businesses. I mean, I'm not sure where Platinum University would be if that would be a huge problem for us, you know? So just having those core members and having those people that fight for what we care about is absolutely huge for our growth and the sustainability of our company.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's a fun space to be in too. Yeah, I'm really excited for it.
Absolutely. Are you going to give us the name of this new platform that you're putting together? Is that something you can release yet?
Well, we really like the name BookThinkers Smart Retention, but I'm not sure if that'll be the name yet. It'll be out in a couple months though, and if you follow BookThinkers on Instagram, you'll definitely be aware of it. And we'll offer a free trial for everybody that wants to get in the platform and kind of play around with it too. But I can't wait because it's also the ideal tool for me. I mean, I mentioned to you earlier that when I finish a book, I want to systematically review those notes, but that's not an automated process anywhere. It's not an automated process anywhere on the internet that also combines the social aspect. And that's kind of what I need. Like, I want to see what my friends are reading in a way that's a little bit more organized and standardized than social media. So I can't wait for it. But yeah, I think it might be called Smart Retention. We'll see though. We'll see.
I like it. I mean, I think that's a real good point to end on. I think you provide some absolutely insane value for our community. And I think what you're putting together is going to be brilliant. And I'd love to help out in any which way we can. If there's anything our community can do to support you, please let us know, because I love what you're doing. I love the impact that you're having on people's lives, because as far as I'm concerned, reading is what started my own journey, and you're giving that gift to so many other people.
Yeah, I'm trying to make it sexy again. That's what I say sometimes.
Because you should have taken your top off and like done a little bit of a shoot with it. Hey, go on, go for it.
Yeah, it's so funny because, I mean, reading, like, why was I so turned off? Why were you so turned off from it when we were younger? I mean, it's not a cool thing until you get into these communities. And so, yeah, anything that I can do to help move that needle, just like a half a percentage point, you know what I mean? And but hey, I really appreciated today's conversation. I love everything that you guys do at Platinum University. I'm happy that I can help contribute content and get to meet some of the wonderful people on your team and in your community. And I'm sure that BookThinkers and Platinum University will continue to find ways to work together. And I'll definitely make you guys aware of when this platform comes out. And same offer to you. Anything that BookThinkers can do to help support your business or share specific pieces of content or whatever we can do, just let us know.
Love that. I really appreciate that, man. And where else can people find you? Obviously, they can find you BookThinkers on Instagram. Where else are you available?
Bookthinkers.com, our website, has a lot of good resources. We also host a podcast where we interview sort of the world's top authors in different spaces. So, the Grant Cardones or the Patrick Bet-Davids or the Robert Greens or the Ryan Holidays of the world, they're all on our show. You could search BookThinkers on any podcast platform and you'll find access to those episodes. And most of the time I'm interviewing them because they're my favorite authors. And the co-owner of BookThinkers, Ryan, also hosts some podcasts too. So you can go check us out there and eventually on the App Store. And, if you search Smart Retention, you'll find us there too.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time, man. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, Joe, I really appreciate it. And I know that we're kind of cut from the same cloth, non-readers and kind of wild to readers and secure and happy. So I'm happy that we had the chance to connect today.
Me too, brother. It's an absolute pleasure. Take care, man.
This is the Platinum Podcast.